On June 22, 1941, the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa, the greatest invasion in military history. Millions of Axis troops, divided into 3 army groups, crossed the border and began the advance through the vast area of the Soviet Union. Army Group North advanced from East Prussia, through the Baltic states towards Leningrad. The objective of the Army Group Center was to push through Belarus, toward the Soviet capital, Moscow. Army Group South was tasked to seize the industrial resources and Great Plains of Ukraine and southern Russia, headed towards Rostov-on-Don, the Gate of Caucasus. By September 1941, Army Group South began to cross the Dnieper River and push Soviet troops further to the east. On the southern flank of the Army Group South was the area of the advance of the 11th Army, under the command of General Eugen Ritter von Schobert. By mid-September, the 11th Army reached the coast of the Sea of Azov, leaving behind 2 isolated pockets of Soviet resistance on its right flank, the city of Odessa and Crimean Peninsula. The long siege of Odessa began in August 1941, when the Romanian Fourth Army surrounded the city. The Soviet Independent Coastal Army, formed in Odessa from the elements of the 9th Army and the city garrison, received the supplies and reinforcements by the ships of the Black Sea Fleet from the bases in Crimea. Despite all efforts, the Romanian Fourth Army was not able to break the Soviet resistance. For the advancing German army, Crimea posed a greater threat than an isolated Odessa. Although Crimea was not set as a target, during the initial planning of Operation Barbarossa, the strategic importance of the peninsula was recognized, very soon after the conflict began. Because of its shape and location, Crimean Peninsula dominates the Black Sea. Connected with the mainland by the narrow Isthmus of Perekop, and even narrower Arabat Spit, Crimea is almost an island. To the east, it is separated from the Kuban region by the Strait of Kerch. Through the Strait of Kerch, Red Army could with ease bring the fresh troops on Crimea, and the Isthmus of Perekop could be a starting point of offensive actions against the German right flank. As the main base of the Black Sea Fleet, Crimea was very well defended, and particularly dangerous as an airbase for the raids against the Romanian oil fields. The first airstrikes on Romanian oil fields, launched from Crimea, began in July 1941. Even Hitler labeled Crimea as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. All this led to the Führer Directive 33, where Crimea was set as the target. The supplement to Directive 34, from August 1941, raised the priority of the occupation of Crimea even further. By the time the 11th Army began preparation for the push on Crimea, an accident strikes. On September 12, General Ritter von Schobert died in a plane crash. On September 17, General Erich von Manstein took over the command of the 11th Army. When he arrived at his headquarters, von Manstein found out that limited forces of the 11th Army were split in 2. The bulk of his forces, the 30th Corps supported with the 3rd Romanian Army, advanced towards Melitopol, in support of Army Group South push to Rostov-on-Don, while 54th Corps, with only 2 infantry divisions, the 46th and 73rd, prepared for the attack on Crimea. Von Manstein soon realized that he could not successfully fight on 2 fronts, so he decided to concentrate his efforts on Crimea first. He thought that further advance to the east would be too dangerous if the right flank is exposed, so he decided to regroup his troops. The shape of the Crimean Peninsula did not give von Manstein many options. However, he wanted to assess all possibilities, to avoid the costly frontal assault. Considering that German paratroopers did not recover from their costly victory in Crete a few months earlier, and the fact that the Axis had no amphibious capability in the Black Sea, von Manstein had no other choice but to launch a ground attack. Even in these circumstances, he wanted to find the method for bypassing the Perekop defenses. However, there was one more option still available. Between the Isthmus of Perekop and the narrow Arabat Spit lies a water surface, known as Sevash, a large system of shallow lagoons. Shallow enough for the infantry to cross. In the days before the attack, von Manstein ordered an extensive reconnaissance and survey of the Sevash, hoping to find a route across. However, tidal conditions, at this time of year, were unsatisfactory. The water of the Sevash was not deep, but the bottom was too soft and muddy for infantry to cross. Von Manstein now had no other alternative but to conduct a frontal attack at Perekop, and he knew it would not be easy. Luftwaffe aerial reconnaissance and probing attack of Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division on September 12 gave him insight into how strong the defenses on Perekop are. He also knew that his troops have to break the fortified line in a place where any form of maneuver or surprise was impossible. Moreover, the terrain on Perekop Isthmus has no vegetation, with only minimal relief to provide cover and concealment. What awaited the troops of the 54th Corps was a battle in the conditions of the First World War. To give his 54th Corps as much advantage as possible, he stripped the advancing 30th Corps of its corps-level artillery, transferring all available heavy artillery battalions to the 54th Corps sector. Armor support was the task of the Assault Gun Battalion 190, armed with the Stug 3 assault guns. By the time of Operation Barbarossa, Stug 3 assault guns were still available only in small numbers. They were armored vehicles, designed as an infantry support weapon, with thick frontal armor, and armed with the short 75mm gun, intended for the destruction of enemy fortifications, if possible, from the point-blank range. According to the final plan, the 73rd Division would advance on the western side, while the 46th Division would advance on the eastern side of Perekop Isthmus. The Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division, the only motorized division of the 11th Army, and the 49th Mountain Corps, consisted of the 1st and 4th Mountain Divisions, would stay in reserve to exploit the 54th Corps breakthrough. The defense of the Crimea was the task of the newly formed 51st Army, under the command of General Fyodor Kuznetsov. The 51st Army was formed hastily, in August of 1941. The core of the army was the 9th Rifle Corps, with its 2 divisions, commanded by General Pavel Batov. In addition to the 9th Corps 2 regular rifle divisions, Kuznetsov Army had 2 newly formed reserve rifle divisions, 4 militia divisions, and 1 tank regiment. Kuznetsov has spread his divisions throughout the peninsula. The defense of the Perekop Isthmus was the task of the 156th Rifle Division, under Colonel Alexander Danilin. The 156th Rifle Division built 3 lines of defense across the Perekop Isthmus. The outer line of defense consisted of a series of strongpoints, with 2 rifle battalions deployed in each. The main line of defense was centered upon the formidable Tatar Wall, an ancient moat that spreads across the entire isthmus, upgraded by the Soviets in the massive anti-tank obstacle, more than 10 meters deep and 30 meters wide, also known as the Tatar Ditch. A thick belt of barbed wire and anti-tank obstacles protected all 3 defensive lines. In addition, the Soviets spared no anti-personnel mines, placing them in large quantities in the area, alongside buried 50 kilograms aerial bombs, and even large naval mines. The terrain in front of the defensive line was completely open, without trees or vegetation, so the Soviets could observe every move the Germans made. 2 rifle battalions from the 530th Rifle Regiment, of the 156th Rifle Division, formed a defensive line on the Litovsky Peninsula, to stop any German attempt to cross the Sivash. The 106th Rifle Division under the command of General Batov, formed the Divisional Reserve Group. At 5 a.m., on September 24, the German offensive began, when artillery opened fire at the Soviet positions. After 2 hours of artillery preparation, at 7:30 a.m., the first engineers went into the no man's land, and began to clear the obstacles, suffering heavy losses in the process. Since the battle was more like the battles fought during the First World War, the Germans decided to use the methods learned during the First World War. The Germans created the Stoßtruppe, assault groups, mixed formations built around infantry units, and supported by engineers and assault guns. Instead of costly frontal assault, the goal of the assault groups was to sneak up the enemy positions and take them, preferably by the use of hand grenades. The focus of the fighting on the first day was the Chervony Chobon State Farm, an advanced strongpoint defended by the 2nd Battalion, of the 361st Rifle Regiment. The men of the 73rd Division fought all day to break the 2nd Battalion defensive positions, surrounded by the thick obstacle belt. After intense close combat, the 2nd Battalion was gradually destroyed piece by piece, and only after Luftwaffe bombardment, the farm strongpoint was finally overrun. On the first day of the offensive, the 73rd Division suffered 770 casualties. At the same time, the 46th Division advanced on the eastern part of the Perekop Isthmus, destroying forward enemy emplacements in the process. The 46th Division suffered 329 casualties on the first day, mainly by the precise Soviet artillery, while making only modest progress. The cost of the first day was over 1,100 casualties, without even reaching the second line of the defense. Although he knew it would be tough, von Manstein now realized how difficult task lays ahead. Now Kuznetsov also knew that the Germans were making their main effort at Perekop. Immediately he sends the 442nd Rifle Regiment, of the 106th Rifle Division, to reinforce the 156th Rifle Division. On the second day of the offensive, on September 25, the Germans managed to penetrate the second line of defense, repelling the Soviet counterattack, carried out by the 5th Tank Regiment. German losses on the second day were significantly less than the first day. Both German divisions lost 322 men. The Soviet 156th Rifle Division, on the other hand, lost 1/3 of the infantry. Now the German troops find themselves in front of the final obstacle, the Tatar Ditch. After 2 days of the heavy close-quarter fighting, both sides were exhausted. For the attack on Tatar Ditch, von Manstein reinforced assault troops with a pioneer battalion, of the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division. The main assault, against the Tatar Ditch, began on the morning of September 26, with a terrific artillery preparation that used up much of the remaining artillery ammunition, followed by the dive-bombing attacks by Junkers Ju-87 bombers. Under cover of the smokescreen, and supported by Stug 3 assault guns, infantry moved carefully over no man's land, reaching the ditch around 9 am. Reaching the ditch was not a problem. The hard part was getting out. The Soviets built their main defensive line so close to the ditch that defenders could throw hand grenades in it. By sheer determination, men of the 73rd and 46th Divisions fought their way out. By 10:30 am, the Soviet defense began to collapse, and finally broke. German troops surged forward, reaching the town of Armyansk on the same day. House-to-house fighting in Armyansk, with the remnants of the 156th Rifle Division, lasted for the rest of the day. Seeing what is going on, In the afternoon Kuznetsov committed his reserve, in the hastily organized counterattack. The counterattack of the 106th Rifle Division made limited success, pushing the men of the 46th Division back in the ditch. However, in the sector of the 73rd Division, von Manstein committed his last reserve, a battle group from the 50th Division, just arrived from Odessa. Fighting over the Armyansk continued throughout the next day, September 27th. Armyansk changed hands several times throughout the day, but ultimately remained in the German hands as the day ends. On the same day, Germans constructed a wooden bridge on the western end of the Tatar ditch, which enabled them to bring Stug 3s of the Assault Gun Battalion 190 across. The next day, Kuznetsov ordered one final counterattack on Armyansk. After the failure of the counterattack, Kuznetsov informed the Soviet High Command that he had no reserves left, and requested permission to withdraw to reserve positions near the village of Ishin. The Soviet High Command reluctantly authorized Kuznetsov's request to withdraw. Both divisions of the 54th Corps suffered a total of 2,641 casualties, including 5 battalion commanders, 8 company commanders, and 49 platoon leaders. And they only reached half of the way. During the battle, the Soviet 156th Rifle Division was almost completely destroyed. After 5 days of heavy fighting, the 73rd Division and the 46th Division badly needed the rest. However, the rest will last a bit more than they anticipated. Instead, to chase the retreating Soviet troops, events in the eastern sector of the 11th Army forced them to wait. As the 11th Army focused its efforts on Crimea, the relief of the pressure on the eastern part of the front towards Melitopol gave the Soviets breathing space to recover and regroup. On September 26, the recovered Soviet 9th and 18th Armies launched the offensive against the Romanian Third Army, which will mark the beginning of the battle, known as the Battle of the Sea of Azov. To prevent the collapse of the Romanian sector, von Manstein sends all of his reserves to the east, including the Stug 3s of the Assault Gun Battalion 190, and most of the 54 Corps artillery. The Battle of the Sea of Azov ended on October 11, and resulted in the total annihilation of Soviet 9th and 18th Armies. Meanwhile, as the battle on the east raged, exhausted troops of the 54th Corps could only watch as the Soviet defenses at Ishin becoming stronger and stronger. In the meantime, Kuznetsov convinced Soviet High Command that the further defense of Odessa is pointless, so he recommended evacuating Odessa and transferring the independent coastal army by sea to reinforce the 51st Army in the Crimea. High Command granted his request, and on September 29, evacuation of the independent coastal army from Odessa began. Considering that Luftwaffe was engaged in fighting around Melitopol, by October 14, the Black Sea Fleet, unopposed evacuated the bulk of the independent coastal army. Von Manstein also convinced the German High Command that the 11th Army could not fight on 2 fronts at the same time. High Command decided that the 11th Army would concentrate exclusively on Crimea. However, the German High Command also decided to remove the 49 Mountain Corps and the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division from the 11th Army, leaving the 11th Army with only 6 divisions deployed in 2 corps. The 11th Army now faced an even more difficult task. The terrain configuration of the new defensive line was nearly as formidable as the one by the Tatar ditch. The new defensive line was formed in the corridor, flanked by 3 large salt lakes and the Black Sea. Only the 3 narrow paths existed between these natural obstacles. The terrain again was fully open, without vegetation. To make matters worse, the area surrounding the lakes was marshy and limited the movement of assault guns. Kuznetsov deployed his best units, the 361st Rifle Regiment, a rifle battalion from the 172nd Rifle Division, and the 2 naval infantry battalions, to defend the widest corridor, between the Black Sea and Lake Starro. The remnants of the 156th Rifle Division defended the route between Lake Starro and Lake Krosno, and the 106th and 271st Rifle Divisions guarded the area between Lake Krosno and the Sivash. The plan of the attack was not so groundbreaking. Considering terrain and options von Manstein had, he decided to attack all 3 corridors simultaneously. The 73rd Division and the 46th Division, already experienced in this form of warfare, will lead the way, attacking the first 2 corridors. The 22nd Division would attack the corridor next to Sivash. The 3 other divisions, the 50th, 132nd, and 170th Division, formed the reserve to exploit any breakthrough. Approximately 20 Stug 3s, of the Assault Gun Battalion 190, stood against the 9 operational T-34 tanks, of the 5th Tank Regiment. Knowing what awaits him, von Manstein this time requested more significant Luftwaffe support. Oberst Werner Mulders, the Luftwaffe's top-scoring pilot, and Luftwaffe's rising star, Hauptmann Gordon Golub, were among the pilots assigned for the support over Ischen. In the morning of October 18, 1941, a final offensive on Perekop Isthmus began. After 3 hours of artillery preparation, 3 German divisions under cover of the smoke screen simultaneously launched an attack. In the World War I style of the battle, the results for the attacker were predictable. The 22nd Division, inexperienced in this type of fighting, suffered the heaviest losses on the first day. The 22nd Division had 685 casualties. However, the 22nd Infantry Division made the greatest success on the first day, when troops of the 65th Regiment crossed Sivash and bypassed the Soviet defense. The other 2 divisions made almost no progress, losing additional 600 men combined. The second day of the battle finally led to German success. Supported by Stug 3s and 2 cm flak platoon that suppressed the Soviet machine gunners, men of the 22nd Division sneaked close enough to Soviet positions to engage them with hand grenades and automatic weapons. By the end of the day, men of the 22nd Division pushed the Soviet 106th and 271st Rifle Divisions back from their trenches. Even greater success came on the western part, when troops of the 73rd Division penetrated the defensive line, reaching the town of Ischen. By the evening of October 19, the 51st Army collapsed, and Kuznetsov lost control over the battle. Just when it seemed that nothing could stop the German advance, the arrival of the Independent Coastal Army, on October 20, changed the situation on the ground. The roles have now changed. Now the Soviet troops were exposed in the open, forced to attack, while Germans shifted from offensive to tactical defense. From October 20, heavy fighting for Ischen began. The town shifted hands on multiple occasions, but ultimately remain in the German hands. Von Manstein gradually committed all of his reserves to reinforce the already mutilated 73rd and 46th Divisions. On October 22, the Soviet High Command relieved Kuznetsov of command of the defense of Crimea, replacing him with the Vice Admiral Gordy Levchenko. Under the constant Luftwaffe attack, charging over the open field, on well-defended German positions, by October 25, the Independent Coastal Army offensive has lost momentum. On October 26, von Manstein committed his last reserve, the fresh 132nd Division, for the final push. The Soviets began to fall apart, and units began retreating without orders. During the heavy fighting on the Perekop Isthmus, the 11th Army suffered over 12,000 casualties, equivalent to an entire division. The 51st Army and Independent Coastal Army had lost about a quarter of their strength, trying to hold the Perekop positions. The 51st Army almost ceased to present the fighting force. With a win on the Perekop Isthmus, Germans finally gain a foothold on the Crimean Peninsula. However, this was only the beginning of the heavy fighting, which will culminate during the siege of Sevastopol. The strategic importance of Crimea will play its part later in the war. To recognize the efforts and courage of the fighting men, in 1942, the Germans issued the Crimea Shield, a military decoration, awarded to the men who served in the area for at least 90 days.